You may have somebody that either doesn't want to pound, right? They don't want to like have to load up their joints, or even an older individual that may not even have the ability to do that right now. You can use this blood flow restriction and really do a low dose of exercise and still get a really interesting response.
Hello and welcome to the Physical Preparation Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Robertson, and I'll be joined on the line later today by the Mike Reinold. Now, before we jump into this week's episode, I want to give you a quick recap of the week that was, what's new in my neck of the woods, and what I am looking forward to this week. So, man, let's get right into it. Lots of good things last week, coaching, training, all the good stuff. The weather was beautiful. It was like 60s and like even 70 here on Saturday, which was amazing. Kendall wrapped up, had her final cookie booth, so she was excited to be done with that. Saturday, Cade had like all the things booked. I don't think we planned it like this, but he had a basketball game at 11, which he won, which means he had to play later in the day. So we had a basketball game at 11, came home, had lunch, went to this huge indoor trampoline park where he went and bounced and ran around with his friends for like an hour, had pizza and cake, and then had another basketball game at 3, which unfortunately they lost. But then even when all that was done, at the back end, he got 2 pieces of artwork submitted to the school, like the district art fair. So that was pretty exciting for him. So Saturday was a little bananas, especially because it was 70. Like we wanted to be outside and, doing more active stuff. It was great. But it was nice to come home at the end of the day, walk with the dog, spend some time outside. We grilled out, and all in all, pretty solid weekend. And then as far as this week goes, lots of focus on this Complete Coach seminar. Very, very excited to do this. First time I've ever taken this event live on the road. And I think part of the reason I'm so excited about it is when you go to a lot of events these days, you're basically just getting lectured to for 2 or 3 days. And I'll be frank, like I love Con Ed as much as the next person, but I mean, I just don't always learn the best. I learn the best in a live format, in a live setting, but I don't learn the best when I'm just getting lectured to and I'm stationary for 2.5, 3 days. So big emphasis on this weekend is what do you need to know? Like what are the core things that you need to know that I needed to deliver to you in a lecture format? And then how can we make the rest of the event as hands-on, as integrated as possible? Because I feel like that's what's really going to make a big impact. Like I learn a lot better when I'm active and I'm involved in the learning process versus just being lectured to. So got my work cut out for me. I've kind of got pieces of it put together. I've got other parts that are outlined that I need to put into a PowerPoint. There's a lot of work, as you can imagine, not to mention just the logistics of it, because we're not just doing the seminar itself, but, we're doing a dinner Friday night. Saturday, I think we're going to do some sort of event. I think we're going to end up doing axe throwing. Like, it's going to be fun, because I just hate going to an event and, well, one, getting lectured to, but second, feeling like, I don't know, like I just lost a whole weekend. So I'm going to make a big emphasis that we're going to learn some stuff, but we're going to have a lot of fun in the meantime as well. So, man, that's what's new in my neck of the woods. I hope you're having an amazing week. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to jump into this awesome episode with my guy, Mike Reinold. It seems like every day I talk to a young trainer or coach who is frustrated. Maybe they're frustrated with the results they're getting. Maybe they're frustrated because they don't have trusted resources to learn from. And maybe they're frustrated because they simply don't have enough clients and wonder how long they'll be able to stay in the industry. So if that sounds anything like you, I've got something that I know will help. My Complete Coach certification was created for trainers and coaches just like you, who are serious about the results they get and who know that becoming a better coach can directly translate to a bigger bottom line. This certification is going to take the last 20 years of my life's work and put it all into one massive course. In it, you'll learn how to use the R7 system to create seamless, integrated, and efficient programs for clients and athletes of all shapes and sizes. How to create the culture, environment, and relationships with everyone you train so you can get the absolute best results. And the exact progressions, regressions, and coaching cues I use in the gym, from squatting and deadlifting to pressing and pulling and everything in between. Of course, there's a ton more that I cover, but that should give you a pretty good idea of what the cert is all about. Now here's the thing. Spots for the certification will only open twice per year for a limited time only. To get on the insiders list, just head over to CompleteCoachCertification.com. Again, CompleteCoachCertification.com, and then stay tuned for emails in the coming weeks. Thanks so much for your support, and I hope you'll pick up a copy of the Complete Coach Certification when it launches. Mike Reinold is a world-renowned and award-winning clinician, researcher, and educator. As a physical therapist, athletic training, and strength and conditioning coach, he specializes in all aspects of sports performance and rehabilitation. Mike is currently the co-founder of Champion PT and Performance in Boston, Massachusetts, and senior medical advisor for the Chicago White Sox. In previous years, he's worked at prestigious institutions like the American Sports Medicine Institute, Massachusetts General Hospital, and as head athletic trainer and physical therapist for the Boston Red Sox. He is the president-elect of the American Academy of Sports Physical Therapy, and he has authored dozens of publications, lectured at national conferences, and has an educational website, podcast, and online courses at MikeRobertson.com. Now in this show, Mike and I take a deep dive into the world of blood flow restriction training. We cover what it is, what it does, who should be using it, and even tap into the practical side like protocols and workouts that you should be using. Whether you're doing BFR on a regular basis or just hoping to learn the ropes, I think this podcast has something for everyone in it. But enough for me, let's do this. Mike, man, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Really excited to have you back on. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I don't know. I'll at least start by saying thank you for having me, Mike. Obviously, one of my favorite podcasts that we've been listening to for years now. How many years have you been doing this?
It's like 6, dude. Isn't
that crazy?
If it's not 6, it's close to 6. Yeah.
That's amazing. Congrats for doing it that long.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me and for how much you do. So I'll tell your audience here how I just, told Mike he's one of my favorite strength coaches of all time. So it's an honor to be on and to be part of this because I've learned so much from you. So hopefully I can help. But yeah, I'm Mike, PT, athletic trainer, strength coach. I do a little bit of everything, but I have a clinic up in Boston, big sports performance gym, and a PT clinic called Champion PT and Performance. I'm also helping out the White Sox now, soon to be the president of the American Academy of Sports Physical Therapists. So I got a lot of weird projects I'm working on, but for me, it's all about being like a clinical educator in my mind. It's still about just like I'm at Champion right now. I just, working on people all day and working with people out in the gym and then, go teach what we do to others. So I think that's why, I really resonate from your educational style too, Mike.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And, I think we talked about this maybe very briefly at the start, but it's hard to believe. So I've been doing the show 6 years. I think it's been at least 4, if not 5, since I've had you on. Now, obviously, some things have changed since then. So what's new in your neck of the woods? Like, what has changed for you in the last 5 years?
Yeah, I was mildly holding a grudge. I thought maybe we had a falling out that I was aware of or something.
You didn't know about? I'm never bringing Mike back on.
No, I mean, with anything like the last 4 or 5 years, I think what I've been really fortunate to do is the people around me know this, and if you heard me on other podcasts and stuff, they know that I'm like a maniacal systemizer, right? I love process. I love systems. I actually like the building things, right? Mm-hmm. So, for me, I've spent a lot of time building out Champion, building out my online, presence and stuff like that. But I've built it in enough way where I've built some great teams around me that if I had to say what's changed for me most in the last 4 or 5 years is that I feel like my role has evolved more to a servant leader, right? Where I sincerely say that I've done pretty much everything I want to do with my career. It's not about me anymore. It's about helping everybody else, the people around me, the people in my team. It's about helping them leapfrog me to get what they want out of their careers now. So it's funny, and I'm sure you've gone through this at some point in your career, but when you get to that point where your focus is on helping the others around you, everything not only becomes less stressful, but it becomes more fun. Yes. And guess what happens in the long run? you become more successful somehow. It's
Yeah,
like amazing how it works.
yeah,
So I mean, that's for me. I've been just working on leading and building good teams and helping others achieve their goals, and it's been a blast.
I love it, man. I love it. And if you're cool with it, I think what I'd like to focus on here today, because you're one of those people, like we could talk about a million things, right? We could talk about knees, shoulders, hips, backs, but I would love to talk about BFR or blood flow restriction training today, because I know this is something you're excited about, you're passionate about. So for the people listening in, if they've never heard of it, what is BFR and what originally got you into it? Like, why were you like, oh yeah, this sounds exciting, I'm going to check this out?
I like it. Yeah. BFR it's really neat. So like you said, blood flow restriction training. Originally came from a technique called Katsu, which is from Japan, right? And it's been used for, much longer than people here in America think, right? It's been one of those things that I think we're, building popularity in other countries before we got it to the point here in the States where we started to get a little bit more like scientific about it. Like, let's research it. Let's not just, kind of just jump right in. But like in a nutshell, what it involves is like placing something around your extremity. So your arms, your legs, like a band, a cuff, a strap, something like that, to restrict the amount of blood flow that goes into that limb. And when you restrict it, it starts a cascade of events in your body that essentially help you get strength, right? And it's kind of one of those things like, I don't know why you would ever think of it, right? Like maybe the physiologists in the world, like this is a no-brainer for them. But for us clinically, like at first you see it and you say, okay, we've been doing this a long time, Mike. Like there's a lot of fads that come and go.
Yes. Yes.
So we kept an eye on it. We watched it evolve to one of those things where, okay, the pro athletes were starting to get into it like 5-6 years ago. And, that doesn't necessarily mean it's effective. That just means it's popular. Right.
Right.
But I feel like it really took that next step. And there's some great people out there, like Johnny Owens is like probably one of our like leading researchers in this field. Like, with his company, they've done just so many great things in terms of research that actually it's shown us now that, heck, this thing's real. And it's gotten to the point where it's effective. It's scientifically based now that I think we can move forward. I can't say we 100% with certain understand the science,
right?
But there's a lot of hypotheses about why it's happening. I don't think we have definitive proof yet, but there is no doubt that using blood flow restriction training or doing exercises with these cuffs on is effective at gaining strength. But here's the really cool part. What it does is it allows you to exercise with low loads. Mm-hmm. So meaning less weight, and still get the same strength benefits as if you were using a heavy load, right? And for the physical therapy and rehab world, that is amazing, right? Now you have somebody that's post-operative, right? Maybe, or an acute injury where maybe their tissue doesn't have the capacity to handle like 80% of a 1 rep max that they would normally be doing for their training. We can now have them work out in like even down to the 20% of 1 rep max. And they still get the same strength benefits as if they would if they were doing the heavy loads.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so cool.
I love that. And like you alluded to, I've got, a couple athletes that I've had over the years where as soon as I got switched onto this, and I'm going through your course, which we'll talk about later, but like as soon as you started mentioning some of these things, I'm like, damn, I wish I could have used it on this person or that person. And whether it's a post-op rehab type person, or, sometimes you just have like these older athletes, right? They've been in the game 10, 15, 20 years. They're a little bit beat up. Man, they're not really trying to go in the gym and bang out 1RM squats. But if you can take them in there and you can you can use some of these other tools, right? Like, hey, and not to say you don't ever push, the outputs, but hey, now you can really dial those days back and focus on some of this stuff to help build some strength in the tissues, support all of those underlying things without just blowing up their joints in the process.
Right. Yeah. And that's a great one. We have the injured or the post-operative person that has restrictions. That's an obvious one. But I like how you said that right there. And I think if you own a gym or you're working at a gym, I mean, there's so many people that you probably have for clients that either are still building their capacity and they don't want to just blow it out because, they're a 45-year-old that has to go to work tomorrow, right? They don't want to,
Right. Right.
they don't want to not be able to walk up the stairs like some of our athletes, right? But, you may have somebody that either doesn't want to pound, right? They don't want to like have to load up their joints or, even an older individual that may not even have the ability to do that right now. You can use this blood flow restriction and really do a low dose of exercise and still get a really interesting response. And, the sky's the limit, right? Like your creativity starts to take over, like you said, of like, this would be a great person I could do this with, or this would be, I wish I could have done it with this person. And I think that's what we're finding. It's a really neat thing.
Yeah, I love it, man. So when it comes to application with your rehab people, how are you applying it? Are you doing more like isolated type stuff? Are you doing more integrated big bang exercises? Like what have you found to be successful?
That's a great question because there's a few ways you could do it, right? If somebody's injured, right, or somebody has a specific weakness, so let's say like their quad's weak,
Yeah.
right? That's a very common situation for a lot of people injured post-operative. Man, you have ACL reconstruction right now. The chances of your quad being strong at 6 months isn't that good.
Right.
So, we're actually, you start to think like, what are we going to do in the future with like these post-operative knees? It could be really, really neat. But you have that person that's like, 2, 3, 4 weeks after surgery and then that isolated quad weakness now. Beforehand, like think about it, we couldn't load the quad.
Right.
So we would just have to do just high volume, low intensity type things that you could argue maybe weren't even super effective.
Right.
So we'll put BFR and work isolated weak muscles. So muscles that need strengthening in an isolated fashion. So knee extensions, wherever it may be, just as an example,
Yep.
We'll work that for that isolated muscle. We'll do that all the time. And then I think as they evolve, what we start to do is we'll still work on that isolated strength, but then we'll start like kind of building out those functional movements a little bit. So as we get to like lunge, step, squat, deadlift type things, like, and those people, what we'll probably do is combine some of the BFR with a low load with traditional high load exercises as much as we can. So that way you almost get like a double benefit of those two. So, that's how we try to transition it. But other things like that are surprisingly effective is, let's say, again, you have somebody with an acute injury or post-operative knee, something like that. You could just put the BFR cuffs on their legs and have them ride the bike for 10 minutes. And it's very impactful. So It helps with their strength. They're gassed, by the way. So you should try that on yourself too, by the way. Is just get on the Airdyne bike or whatever and ride that like you would with the cuffs on. And it's dramatically different, but within their workload capacity at that time.
Right.
So it's a really neat way to start progressing people.
What's been really interesting, and I know you've kind of got your ear to the streets and you know what's going on in our space, but it's been really interesting to see the pendulum swings in the fitness space, right? So when I was growing up, I remember going to the gym with my dad and it's just selectorized machines everywhere, right? Just Nautilus machines everywhere. And then everything was had to be functional and free weights. And if you were on any kind of machine or you used a Smith machine, you were laughed at. And so now it's interesting to see us coming back. Hopefully we'll land somewhat in the middle, but hey, maybe there's a use for some of these machines that we threw out 15, 20 years ago, hey, in this case, somebody needs a quad. There could be worse things than using a BFR cuff and using a leg extension to get that quad back.
Exactly right. And it always cracks me up. I don't know where this came from. There are scientific studies that have been published in journals that compare two groups. This group does isolated strengthening, this group does functional strength, whatever. Right. So whatever that means. So knee extension versus lunges, for example, right? That would be a type of study. And you know what they always show? That they're both effective, maybe one's slightly more effective. But I always tell everybody, right? This is like peanut butter and chocolate. They're better together.
Right.
We don't have to pick one of them. So for somebody one of the things we do at Champion, one of our big kind of concepts is that a weak muscle really can't help. It can't stabilize. It can't produce torque. So for us, we want to work on isolated strengthening as well as movement patterns. So
Yes.
we strengthen muscles and we load movements. I think
Mm,
that's like one of like our concepts, and that's not earth shattering, right? I know that's not like even unique, right? But we'll load a squat pattern, but we will strengthen a quadricep, And
yes.
I think there's a time and a place for both, and it depends on the person that's right in front of you.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's great. Okay, so something you had mentioned there piqued my interest because I have heard about people using the cuffs to elicit a stronger aerobic training effect as well. So is that something that you've messed around with? Like I don't know. I am not as well versed in that area. I haven't read as much on that, but is that something you've used and dabbled with?
So people, we cuffs have been used for aerobic training with success, but the success continues to point towards more like strength and like mitigation of atrophy or something like that, like
Yep.
with somebody that's deconditioned. And it's funny, there's even some studies like on just walking with them in like an elderly population, or even just sitting there and pumping them up and deflating them and not even exercise.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all these different spectrums. So there's a lot of research on during aerobic training using those, but I think there's still a lot of theories about the benefits on aerobic capacity.
Mm,
I think just that part is still part of like our scientific like hole that we're trying to fill right now. There
right.
are some early kind of things that are pointing in that direction that it should be helpful, but I think that's definitely something in terms of aerobic capacity. But using it during aerobic training and having some strength and hypertrophy type benefits are definitely some things that we have seen.
Yeah. You know, kind of steering back to this idea of using the bike, I think one of the things that I like about that idea, because again, when you talk about like activities that can help you load a muscle, right, without putting too much stress on it, you're thinking more like concentric activities, right? So like a backward sled drag would
Yep.
work really well. So like that's one of the things. Wow, I just said like about 1,000 times too. But just thinking like with my basketball guys, right? That's something that I'll use quite a bit is I'll put them on just instead of that, not even the Airdyne, I'll put them on the spin bike and just have them turn up the resistance to build some quad strength and quad capacity. And they're always shocked at like, oh wow, like I really feel my quads. Even the guys that struggle to feel a quad per se can feel it on that. So that's definitely something I'm going to have to try is combining that spin bike with a little bit of loading with the BFR to see what kind of response I get, because I could see that being very beneficial.
Right. And think about, especially with your basketball athletes, without impact loading.
Yes. Yes.
That's huge. And
Yes.
that's where the excitement comes in. Like, is you have like an impact athlete, like a basketball player in season, as an example, you're trying to maintain strength, maybe even build in some people, right? But you're trying to at least maintain strength in a sport where they're just pounding on the hardwood, right?
Yep.
So, like ankle, knee pain, stuff like that from those types of things, that those will just cause issues with them over time.
Right.
This is a great strategy to get them in a low load, low impact environment and still get some strength maintenance. It's great.
That's awesome, man. Okay, so when you and I first started going back and forth on this, one of the things that you mentioned is that BFR is a great tool, right? But it's also not this be all end all of training. And again, you've been in this space long enough, people are very quick to hype up this is like the best thing ever. So with that being said, are there any specific times or instances where you wouldn't use BFR with a client or athlete?
Well, assuming no like medical contraindications, like heart problems, stuff like that. Assuming that, because that's always something. Like if somebody has heart issues or something like that, you get some medical clearance. It's been proven to be super safe in people, right?
Yep.
So that part we're not too worried about, but you still want to get clearance. But assuming that type of thing, I think sometimes where we get carried away with the application is, I still think, and I know you agree with this, I'm going to assume you agree with this, is like we still need a load. We
Yes.
can't always work in a low load environment. We're actually a little nervous. We talk about this internally quite a bit, that if you always do low impact but get strong, are we not building the same tendon strength, the tendon capacity, or maybe like the interaction between muscle tendon bone, that type of thing? So a study actually just came out on the Achilles that showed it did have good properties on the Achilles, but past studies on like patellar tendon, for example, have shown maybe it isn't. So we still don't 100% know, but I think what it goes back to show is that it's a great tool if somebody has the inability to load, to be able to get a good strength response in a low load environment.
Yep.
But it shouldn't ever take the place of high load training as well for people that can. It can complement it.
Yes.
Right. But it's not like that, that sort of thing. The second problem, this is probably what we were texting about, I think at the time or whatever, it was careful when you first try it, is if you put it on and you occlude a decent amount and you don't decrease the load enough or use too much load, you could really overdo it really easy, really fast.
Yes.
Right. So if you're having people, and we've all probably done it because we all wanted to test the limits on ourselves, but if you're having like a ridiculous amount of delayed onset muscle soreness from that, you did too much load.
Yes. Yeah. And I think people always want to over assume their strength levels. So I just did this. Right. I did it the first time ever today. Right. And I was like, okay, the generally prescribed or like researched protocol is the 30, 15, 15, 15, right? So you do 30 reps. Now imagine, first of all, like I'm a power lifter still at heart. Like I don't push the heaviest weights anymore, but like anything over like 8 feels like cardio to me. So doing 30 reps is a lot of reps. So when I did these curls today, literally I was using a 10-pound dumbbell. And I was just shocked at the end of that protocol. Like, oh my gosh, first of all, like the difference between sides. And this is like 2 hours later, I can still feel just the swell in my left arm versus my right. So, like don't.
All right, so
go ahead.
If anybody's listening to this right now, I want you to go on Twitter right now. I want you to tweet at Mike and say, how long does it take for your DOMs to go away? Because
oh my gosh,
that's the question we're going to find. So question for you is, what do you think your 1 rep max? And I know that's an aggressive thing on a bicep curl, but what do you think what 1 rep max on a bicep curl is?
I mean, legitimately, I guessed like, I don't know, 50, 55, something like that. I don't know. Like, it's not something you go and you test your 1 rep max on, but I was like,
exactly,
I don't know.
Right.
So I just kind of guessed me. I'm like, and for me, I was like,
grab a 10.
I'm literally going to go way lighter than I think, because one of my basketball guys told me, he's going through some rehab stuff right now. And I was like, hey, I got this thing and, I want to try it. He's like, oh, I've already tried it. And he's like, this is absolutely the worst thing I've ever done in a weight room. So he kind of scared me off. I'm like, oh, bro, I've had it for like a week and a half. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm just going to leave that in the case for right now.
I think there's a lot of people listening right now that would think doing a 10-pound bicep curl just 75 times, even without blood flow restriction training, would cause some soreness to begin with. Right? And that's something we're not used to a lot of times. 75 reps, it's a lot of reps.
Yes.
Right? And the reason why it goes 30, 15, 15, 15 is you're intentionally trying to smoke yourself in that first set.
Right.
You're trying to get to failure almost on that first set. So that way, when you have that minimal break and you don't get the blood flow back, like your body is sending an extra response to like, hey, let's get some healing going on in this environment. So it's an intentional design that way to be that way. So if an athlete says that it crushed them, then that means they didn't load it appropriately. They probably did too much.
Ah, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so let's stay on this topic. Go ahead.
Well, I was good on this topic, and I think this is good. Is think about this right now. If you were to stand up right now and just do a body weight squat, right? You're doing low load with zero restriction. You have blood flow restriction, which is 0.
Right.
Right. And then you have the spectrum. Like you can slowly start restricting that blood flow, up to 20%, 30%, 40%, 50, 60, 70. You know what I mean? Like you can do that. The higher you are in the blood flow restriction spectrum, the faster you will fatigue.
Yep.
Right. And then now play with the load. Now, so if you have a high load, high restriction, you'll fatigue even faster.
Yep.
Right. So this is where the dosage really comes in. It's not only just about the percent of the rep max, it's also your percentage of limb occlusion pressure that we talk about. And that's why when you're picking out a device, and again, I'm a scientist, I'm a physical therapist, right? Like, published in the literature and stuff, like we focus on, I want to be as specific as possible. So we prefer the cuffs that have specified amounts of pressure where you can say, I want this exact pressure, and it measures your pressure and then strategically applies the right pressure for you. Because if you want to get consistent, reliable outcomes as safe as possible, you have to measure the limb occlusion pressure and make sure you're exercising at the right percentage of that if you want to be precise. So don't get me wrong, you can go on Amazon right now and buy $10 straps and just like choke your arm and do these exercises. And to be honest with you, there is some science showing that if you can estimate pretty good, the pressure, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think we can do better. I think we can be more precise with that.
I like that a lot. Okay. So let's go with that, because kind of the generally accepted principle is like 20 to 30% of your 1RM. What percentage of limb occlusion are you starting with?
So I usually start people off easy because, like your player you talk to, I don't ever want them to do it once and say that was the worst experience ever.
Yes,
right.
Yes, exactly.
I think we, and even yourself, I think so. It tells me a lot about your personality, right? It tells me about everybody's personality. It's the old Seinfeld joke. We're dating ourselves now, Mike, but right? It's like what's maximum strength, right? Like find what's about to kill me, and I'll just take a little bit less, right? Like,
right.
I want to start in the middle and then slowly build up to your envelope of function versus starting at the top and then failing and then have to back off. Yes. Right. So for us, that's what we start with. So, and even like arm versus legs different. Like I'd say, max on the leg, we might do 80% limb occlusion pressure, but we'd never do that on the arm. I can probably do more like 50 on the arm, but I might start somebody, half that, even more on both of those to kind of take that win and then slowly build up. So that way they get some, they're used to it a little bit.
Yeah. Dude, you literally just described what I do with exercise selection. Like to a T. Like, why do you take somebody in the gym, like, okay, 50-year-old gin pop fat loss client, hasn't moved in 15 years. Why would you take them in the gym and have them do lunge to overhead press on day one, right? Like, they're not going to be successful. Right. So start them in a split squat where they're supported on the rack. And if they are okay with that, like, that's great. Keep them there. If they kill it, then it's like, oh, hey, that's a hype moment. Like, hey, you killed that. Like, we're going to go on to the next activity. Right. Versus, like, psychologically, that's such a big shift versus I am going to crush your soul today so that next time you come in, you're going to dread seeing me. Like, nobody wants that. I don't know.
Right. You know what? It's like that Wordle thing now. I'm going to date the podcast now. This is going to be like so not cool in a year. Yeah. So are you doing that Wordle thing?
I'm not. I've had people that talk about it, but I've not done it yet. No.
So the Wordle was really cool. Everybody was having a blast with it. It was a good time. Then this is the story I'm hearing. The New York Times bought it, and now all of a sudden, like they're trying to like keep it going, and the words are just getting so hard that people aren't as successful as they used to be. So now they don't like the game anymore, right? Like you don't want to play a game where you lose. You want to win, right? So you'd never start off with that. Like we call that the minimum effective dose, right? You want to find out, how do we get the most benefit from the least amount of dose that we can possibly do, and then build from there. And like you said, that's how you build self-confidence, right? You don't, especially the Gen Pop client, they come into your gym, you don't want them to leave there embarrassed or feeling bad about themselves or feeling like they don't belong because they can't match the people that they witnessed training next to them, right? Yeah. You want them to go and say like, wow, I crushed my coach's program today. I want to come back tomorrow. Same thing with BFR. Same thing. Like if you don't want to use it the second time, that means you're too aggressive with it the first time.
Wow. That's fantastic advice. Okay. So if somebody has heard this, right? So again, I just hear it's the worst thing ever. How do you sell this? Or maybe how do you explain or set an expectation to your clients and athletes when you're going to introduce this? Like, how do you explain it to them? How is it going to benefit them? Like, break it down for us into like layman's terms so that we would know like, hey, if this is something I want to invest in or something I want to explore, this is how I should explain it to my people.
Yeah, and I talk like that all the time to my people. I try to be as simple as we can with our messages. So when we introduce it, we say like, hey, we're going to try this new thing because it is a little goofy, right? Like I'm going to put a blood pressure cuff on your leg and inflate it up. It feels weird, right?
Right.
So but when you explain it to them, we say like, hey, there's a neat thing, the science, it's shown it's really safe. We're not worried about that, but it's been super effective. Basically, like, how right now, like you don't feel ready to do a squat, for example. We can get some of the same benefits by doing an exercise with this cuff on and you'll feel so much better. You explain to them a little bit that like, hey, we're going to be able to get similar strength gains, but at a low load, and everybody's in on it, right?
Yeah.
When they do it, they're going to, let's say a post-op patient is a good example at a PT clinic. They're doing like basic straight leg raises and knee extensions. Most of the time, they're not gassed afterwards, right? But you do it with BFR that first time, even if it's a little bit like you're on the lower side of the dose of it, right? They will feel like, wow, I am a lot more tired at the end. And that's when you got them, because
Yeah.
they didn't do much more. They still feel like what they did was within their capacity.
Yep.
But their body was like, wow, I'm a lot more tired. So again, they're on board with that. They're saying, okay, that must be effective. I'm tired. Right. So that's what you want to do. If they can't walk because they've delayed onset muscle soreness tomorrow, then yeah, I mean, we just did too much.
Right.
But so it's a learning curve. Bad for them, good for you, right?
Right.
You learn from it.
Yes, yes. Okay, so last but not least, we talked a little bit about this 30-15-15-15 protocol. Seems to be the most widely researched. I would love for you to kind of give us an idea of just what that looks like. I mean, we already kind of talked about the reps, but just talk about the rest periods. And then maybe along those same lines, are there other protocols that we should have on our radar? Because I know you are deep in the research when it comes to this stuff. So is there anything else that you've seen that might be beneficial or things that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, the 30-15-15-15 has been popularized in science because it's very easy to reproduce, right? And a good bunch of studies at the beginning did that. So we've continued to replicate that. I know other experts at this that say 30-30-30, just three sets of 30-30-30, right? And you can see even that's 90 reps. So we went from 75 to 90 reps total. I think, again, it comes to this spectrum of you have volume, you have load, and you have limb occlusion pressure. Those three variables all play together, right? Again, you can do a squat right now with high volume. How many body weight squats can you do right now until you feel tired?
I mean, I have no idea. Probably not.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
like no load. You're just doing a mini squat, like a body weight squat right there. You can do that hundreds of times, right?
Right.
So what you do is you either add load or you add some limb occlusion pressure, and then that becomes more tiring. And then you slowly kind of play with those doses. So we do use the 30-15-15-15 because it's been the most researched. Yeah. I want to be as effective as possible. When you're going through that process, you should be pretty tired after that first set. That's the point. And then for the 15-15-15, I want you to slowly feel like maybe that second set's 15, maybe that third set's 14, maybe that third set is 12. Right? Like meaning like you should be pushing the envelope a little bit with that where it's tired. If you're not, then either your load's too low, or what I would probably play with for this scenario is you need a little bit more limb occlusion pressure.
Okay.
Right? And that's how you feel you should do it. So we do that. There's a 1 minute break in between where you keep cuff inflated, right? So that we still have the restriction of blood flow. And that's what happens. You have that accumulation of metabolites. You have that hypoxic kind of environment that you create. And what you're essentially doing is you're tricking your body into thinking it just had an intense workout, even though the load wasn't what they were expecting. So I'd still recommend that load like sequence, that set rep scheme, just because it's the most researched. Yep. And look, we all have limited time with the people we work with, and they have limited time with what they have to train. So let's be as like reliable and consistent as we can.
Yeah, I love it, man. And if you do the math on that, because too often I think time under tension or like tempo, people just assume that that's just something we randomly prescribe versus thinking about how that actually applies to like set length and physiology, like, that changes things, right? You can do that protocol in like 8 minutes. So you can get a lot of bang for your buck in a very short period of time. So. Right.
And you're not doing like 45 minutes of exercise with this on. Like a lot of our athletes, they might just do 1 or 2 exercises during this.
Yeah.
And then that's it. Then they'll do the rest of their stuff. And we'll see. We've tried playing with it at various parts of people's programs. Like, should we do it at the beginning? Should we do it at the end? And, it depends on where they are in the sequence. But if you're doing it with other like bigger movements and loaded movements, just make sure you probably do the BFR at the end, because the whole goal of it is to be fatigued.
Yes.
Right. So you're going to get less out of your other work if you do it before.
Yes.
Right. So even just one day, it was funny. I had a post-op patient coming, back, some baseball catcher who's coming back from this. And we were doing some like isometric mid-thigh pulls on our force plates, almost like as an exercise, but still, isometric exercise for force production, but we were also quantifying it. And he was getting more and more advanced with his exercises in the BFR. And then we got to a point where all of a sudden his isometric mid-thigh pull was going down. But it was because we were just being, I don't want to say lazy, but like we're in the PT clinic, we're doing his table exercises, we get him going, then we go out into the gym. But he was getting so fatigued from it that we had to just reverse that order. And then all of a sudden his isometric mid-thigh pull just went through the roof, and you start seeing it scale back up because we did it at the right time. So, that's probably common sense, but,
Right.
just worth saying, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so it's been a while since you've been on. You've already done the big question, so I want to take this in a little bit different direction. What's the most impactful change that you've made to your coaching or rehab practices in the past 4 to 5 years?
I like that. I will say, and not that I was necessarily deficient at this earlier, I would say the biggest thing I've done, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, leadership, is flipping the script and just thinking we're a service-based industry. Mm-hmm. And my coaching, my therapy is to serve the person, right? It's not about my objectives. It's not about my goals for that person. It's for helping them achieve their goals, right? And I think a lot of young people in this field, they come in and they have a dream plan for that person. They come in, maybe you're a coach, you bring them through your movement assessment, the table assessment, you talked about their goals, and then you go home like, I'm going to write a killer program for this person, right? But sometimes that's not what the person's looking for necessarily. You didn't take maybe their thoughts or their goals or what they wanted out of that. You thought, I have the best program for that person. For me, I think that's the first thing I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to put myself in the other way around and thinking, it's a service-based industry, and trying to flip the script when I start to think about how I'm going to program people.
Yeah, I love that, man. And it's very hard. I think early on, there's a lot of ego and bravado just in the industry, right? I'm sure I had it coming up. It's like, hey, man, I thought I was a pretty damn good coach. Well, before I really was a pretty damn good coach. But you need a little bit of confidence and a little bit of swagger. But, I think the longer you do this, the more you realize, like, hey, man, it's really not about me. It's really all about this person, their goals, what they want to achieve from working with you, this athlete, the things that they can achieve in their career. Like, hey, man, if you can just step back and put your ego on hold, you can do some really cool things in this industry, for sure.
Yeah, and it's fun. You see a lot of young people, they get caught up in, they get caught up in like, well, what they want and not necessarily what the other person wants. Yes. I'm a guide. They hire me. I'm here to help facilitate your dream, your goal, right? So we got to work together on that. And I just think that like that change in mindset, I think, has just been helpful. Even though it's subtle, I think it's helpful.
I love it, man. Okay, so lightning round, 4 fairly short questions. Your answers can be as long or short as you like. Ready?
Whoa.
Okay.
Yep.
Number 1, since you've basically given away the whole farm on BFR training, I feel like it's only fair if you talk to us a little bit about the course that you created on this topic, because it's really good.
Well, that one's quick. So myself, one of my friends, Dan Lorenz, another, well-established physical therapist and sports performance coach out there. We teamed up and we made an online program teaching you how to use BFR. So the history, the science, how to apply it, how to pick the right cuffs, that sort of thing, like really a good, deep educational program, because we do think that this is real. We do think it's appropriate. I don't think you need to go through this like crazy certification process. Like, I want more people to be able to learn it. So we wanted to give a really good applicable program that you can do at home and get started. So it sits on my website, MikeRobertson.com. And if you go to the courses, you'll see the blood flow restriction one. But yeah, I mean, we just wanted to put something together so that way, more people can do it, right? And it's, super affordable, and just, we want it to be accessible to more people.
Yeah, I love it, man. Okay, number 2. What did you change about your business during and after the pandemic to help you survive?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's funny. We talk about this as a team here quite a bit at Champion. There's a lot of things we did that got us through the pandemic that we are so happy and will never change back, like online scheduling and just like little things like that, like some of the nuts and bolts with stuff like that. But you know what COVID really did with us is it helped us really streamline that red velvet rope around the type of clients that we want here and the clients that we all thrive off of. So we're passionate about that type of thing. So because we had restrictions on who could come and the capacities and stuff like that, we got really strict with trying to identify our ideal type of client. the people that bring us energy and the people that we can really help. And we really focus on them. And then now, lo and behold, when our capacity is back up and we can get up, it's filled now with our ideal clients instead of some people that maybe, got through the cracks, but you didn't want to say no prior. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's what happened, really nice for us. I think taking a step back like a champion, we're gonna look back and be grateful for this experience because it's helped us mature a little bit.
Yeah. Dude, that's such a great point. And I hope the people that have left IFAST over the years don't necessarily hear this. But, people always ask coming out of the pandemic, like, okay, well, like, what is your business like, right? Like, it's a common question to ask. Like, you're still here, right, but how did it get impacted? And I always told people, we probably lost like 5 to 10% of people that were just either, they were scared to come back or maybe whatever, like, just fearful of going back into a gym environment, which is fine. But then we probably lost legitimately another 5 to 10% where like they probably just weren't the right fit at the gym anymore. So it was like the best thing for everybody involved, right? Because too, like it's one thing to have your ideal client because you want to provide a great service, but it's got to be a great experience for them too, right? So like if you're not meshing, it ultimately ends up working out better for everybody. So I kind of relayed it like that. Like, hey, look, yeah, we lost some people, but those people were probably on their way out the door anyways. So it was actually a good thing in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a good example of that with us at like Champion, for example, like in our service line in the gym, like we got rid of like our group training. Yeah. Like we had classes in the morning, like the classes, like, and I don't even know why we did it. I think it was just because we thought we were supposed to, right? Like, especially when we started in 2013, 2014, like you're supposed to have like, group training, group classes. That was all the rage. And it kept on it. And you know what? Like our coaches hated it probably as much as everybody else. You know what I mean? It wasn't a good fit for anybody. So we got rid of those and it's all semi-private. In the team training people that we had, the group training people that stayed on with us, they loved the semi-private environment even more. Yeah. They're so grateful they did. And it's been a win-win for everybody. And not just the business, not just the clients, but the coaches. Yeah. Coaches like that, they weren't passionate about like, rah, let's go through the circuit together. They want to actually program and coach for people,
Right. I love it, man. Okay, number 3. And hoping you have some inside information here, but man, dude, when are we going to see some pro baseball, man? My son, every day, my son asks, is the lockout over yet? When are they going to play baseball?
It's been crazy too, because this is like our 3rd spring training in a row where we haven't had anything. Yeah. Right. Or it's been disrupted. And what people don't realize is, and you'll appreciate this as the performance coach, our job is to keep these guys healthy and to get the most out of them and to help them enhance their performance. When we don't have the right spring training build up, everything we planned for it's all out the window. Yeah. And it's almost like retrospective and panic a little bit now. So they're going to handcuff us again. We're going to rush to spring training. We're going to have an abbreviated schedule. We're going to get right back into it. That kills us on the inside as like the health and performance department. Yeah. But but to answer your question, I have no insight. Nobody has any insight except for the attorneys on both sides. Right. So it's crazy. But I think for the greater good of the game, like again, just like everything else, hopefully we come out better from this and we get back to it because, we're sad. We want to get back to our game.
I love it, man. For sure. Okay. Last but not least, number 4, what's next for Mike Reinold, dude? I mean, world domination is like at your fingertips. So like, what are you working on now? What are you excited about?
I'm trying to get under a 10 handicap in my golf game. Okay. That's an important goal for me right now.
Yeah, I love it.
I always try to have personal goals as well as like professional goals and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, I'm about to embark on this presidency of the sports academy with the PTs, and for me, it's just about continuing to build. Right, continue to build, my leadership skills, so that way we can help people evolve. But I'm just going to focus on that stuff, and I don't know at the end of this term, and where we'll be, I'm not sure. Like a lot of people, Champion's been around now for about 8 years, maybe a little bit more than 8 years, which is crazy to think of, by the way. My career's gone through like 8-year cycles. Right. So I think that's why I'm getting into more. Let me go work with the White Sox. Let me do the academy stuff. It's because like we've created Champion and it's great. Now I want to go create other things.
Yeah.
Right. I want to create these other things. So I guess I'm creative. So, I'm going to focus on that, and then, we'll see. But, I guess my 8-year clock starting now, we'll have this conversation again when you invite me back in 8 years, because that's the cadence you've been on with me.
If we go 8 years, man, we got big problems. You need to send me some hate mail or something.
Well, same for me too. I mean, we keep saying that, but when was your first blog post? What year? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. 2006 or 2007?
Yeah. Were you like a T-Nation guy and stuff back then?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that was hot back then. I think I started my blog in 2008.
Yeah.
Right. And, Eric Cressy and I, we were friends. We cracked out. We've cracked up about this in the past, but I used to write 2-3 blog posts a week for a decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. People don't appreciate that now. What that is, but we have longevity, Mike. That's why we're still here, I guess.
Yes. Well, and look, it takes a lot longer to write 1,000 or 2,000 word blog post than it does to shoot a 2 or 3 minute video on Instagram. So
I agree.
Just saying, we earned our stripes, dude. We put in some work. That's for sure.
I like it. We'll see. But yeah.
I love it, man. Well, Mike, it's been amazing catching up with you today. Thanks so much for your time. Where can my listeners find out more about you and the great work that you're doing?
I'm easy. Just if you go to my website, just MikeRobertson.com, that's kind of my hub. You can get access to, my blog, my podcast, my courses that we have online. I have a bunch of different variety of things for people, and then all my social media accounts you can get through there as well. It's just easy there. But I'm kind of everywhere. I'm like you, Mike. We're kind of we're a little everywhere. Yeah. So whatever medium you like, but we're getting there. But about to start a new kind of podcast that's more interview based. So heads up, you may be getting an email.
Let's go, man.
To get you on my podcast and stuff. But
yeah, just let me know,
fun,
dude. I love it, man. I love it. Well, again, Mike, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and you were great, my guy.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it again, and thank you everybody for listening. Appreciate it.
All right, my friend, that does it for this week's show with Mike Reinold. Really hope you enjoyed it. Not to leave you hanging, in case you were wondering, it took about 2.5 days for the delayed onset muscle soreness to fully clear from my arm. So definitely enjoyed the workout. Definitely feel like I got my money's worth out of the cuffs, and excited to start using them more. I feel like I've got a lot of clients, a lot of athletes that I want to be using this kind of stuff with, and man, there's a lot of application out there. So whether you've been doing this for years already or whether you're new to the game, I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you took a thing or two away from it. So got one favor to ask. If you're not already subscribed to the show, please take 2 seconds out of your day and do that right now. Wherever you consume podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcasts, go there right now, hit the subscribe button so you know each and every week when a new episode drops. So as always, thank you so much for your support. Love and appreciate you, and we'll be back next week with our next episode. Take care.